China, Russia, and India have all been doing business with each other and other countries, all without the use of the US dollar. Yes, it's possible. Difficult, most certainly, but not impossible. It's quite clear that most of the global trade is done with the reserve currency of the world, the US dollar. However, particularly following the global financial crisis, many countries have expressed their desire to use an alternate currency to do trade in. Just like the pound sterling, no currency can remain king forever. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we are going to look at an issue that generally is not covered in the mainstream media. We're going to talk about China, Russia, India, so many other countries that are all deciding it's better not to use the US dollar if possible. I'm going to get into some of the details of why this is. I'm going to show you the countries, a lot to talk about. So let's begin by taking a look at this article out of the South China Morning Post. China and Japan sign a $29 billion currency swap to forge closer ties. This is just one example. China happens to be a country that is signing currency swap agreements with countless countries all around the world. I've shown you videos before in the past. I've been doing this channel since 2011. I've been showing you every time I see this kind of thing, I bring information to you. In one of those videos, I showed a currency swap agreement list that just basically broke them all down. Every single one. I have brought that to you in this video. I'm just showing you only the new information that's come out. But if you want to do a search online, I'm sure you can find it for yourself. Just type in China currency swap agreement and you could see that. Basically what we have is two countries huge in their global economy, and they are in fact just two out of so many. So let's get into more here. India and Japan sign a $75 billion currency swap agreement. All right, so they get into the details of that agreement. All I wanted to stress from this is in the second paragraph right here, India and Japan agreed to enter into a bilateral swap arrangement of $75 billion. This swap agreement would be 50% higher than our last swap agreement. Okay, so this is generally what I have found, and what I've always told you is that every time they sign these agreements, they are for a certain period of time. Okay, during that period of time, they have to then renegotiate at the end, and it seems like they've always expanded them. China tends to be one. I've shown you that before, and in this case here we have India and Japan expanding that as well. They're always doing this, always, and they're doing so with a way to get around the US dollar. Many people didn't think this was possible, but in fact it's been happening for years and years. Yes, it is smaller, much smaller than what we can see with what's happening with the US dollar in terms of global trade, but as I said in the introduction, no currency lasts forever. And when we look at this, the reserve currency of the world, the US dollar currently, it doesn't mean that it's exclusively the reserve currency of the world. Countries keep all kinds of different things as reserves. Okay, we know that. It's not the only currency available. All right? Business has been done with all kinds of currencies and will continue into the future, but I do see a diversification of the assets held by these different governments. Now, I know that a lot of people that watch this channel regularly know this, but if you would just give me 1 minute to explain what the reserve currency is, basically what we have here are these different countries out there. They need to do business. China and Russia, let's say. Now, China wants to buy oil from Russia. What do? Do they get their currency, they give it to Russia, and then they get their oil? That would make sense, right? But that's not the way it works. In fact, China has to take their own currency, exchange it for the US currency, US dollar, and then give those US dollars to Russia for their oil. And Russia then gives China the oil. And it seems like there's an extra unnecessary step in the middle there. And there was a period of time in which this made sense because you had a very stable currency in the middle there. And that would be a great way to do business because you knew that was going to have value. You kept it in your reserves. You could do trade with other countries. It made sense. But today you have these currencies that are much weaker than the US dollar. So if you have to buy US dollars, you're going to be losing out on the trade. Doesn't seem so good. At the same time, you have the US that is in control of all of the different systems, the financial systems, the transaction systems. So imagine, in a way, an analogy to think of this, the US owns the highways and the roads in between these two countries. Imagine if there's a road that goes in between China and Russia, and you had to travel through this road. You had to pay a toll. Now, if you built your own road, in the long term, that would be much more beneficial because you can avoid paying that toll and you could just go back and forth as you please, and those two countries would deal with each other, and that other toll road, or the US in this example, wouldn't know the transactions that are taking place because they're not on their systems. So that's the whole thing. That's the big picture. I hope that it was informative to you. Another country here, Argentina, nears new currency swap deal with China. All right, this was from a little while back, I believe from September 30th, so 1 month ago. And you're looking at this right now being so, a country like Argentina, their currency has suffered dramatically. They want to be doing business with China in their own currencies. They don't want to do it in the US dollar. It's so weak versus the US dollar, all right? Nigeria and China signed a $2.4 billion currency swap to lift trade. And if you look at the highlighted portion, Nigeria says the deal will reduce the need to use US dollars for trading. They make it very clear. We want to do business with China in their currency because we don't want to use the US dollar. It's not because of some wild event out there. They're making it clear. And it's billions of dollars worth. It's not a small sum. Yes, as I said multiple times, and I know there's going to be 15 comments down below telling me why I'm wrong, telling me that these currencies mean nothing, but you're just truly ignoring reality. This happens to be Malaysia and the People's Bank of China doing business together. They're renewing their currency swap, 3 years, and it goes on, all right? So this right here is just another country, one more to add to the list. And this here is just basically talking about Russian corporations ready to find an alternative to the greenback in mutual settlements with countries of the African continent. All right? This is just talking about that expansion there. I do think that this will, in fact, occur. They're constantly looking for partnerships everywhere, and they want to do so without the use of the US dollar. I completely agree with it. I think it's great. In general, what I would say is that, we don't want one particular country to be complete domination and ruler. Competition, in my reading experience, in my experience in life, competition is good. It's always a good thing to have competition. Okay, as soon as you don't have a competition, you have a monopoly, everybody loses. Everybody. You think that there's a winner because that's your currency, because that's your business, because that's your country, because that's your industry, that's your sector, that's your city, so on. Everybody feels that they will win somehow. Competition is good. Okay? And this is the last thing I wanted to show you. I covered it in a recent video I had done. But essentially, we're looking at China's swap lines. It's an interactive map, which you can see. Look at all the lines. Look at all these countries. And it's not necessarily who you think it might be. Look at all the countries on this list, going from Canada, going from, basically everywhere in Europe. Asia, of course, Africa, South America, it's all over the place. They're doing business with everybody right now, and they're doing so without the use of the US dollar. I think the world is going to be a very, very different place 10, 20, 30 years from now. I think we're going to be looking at a very different world, and I want to know your thoughts on it. So whatever it is, if you don't think it's going to be a very different world, if you do, regardless, I want to hear your thoughts. Please leave them in the comments section below. If you found the video informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, you're supporting this channel, so I do appreciate that very much. I also want to know what you think of these type of videos in general, how I show you what's happening today in the news. I think that, I'm obviously heavily biased, but I think that this is the type of information that we just don't get out there. We're just not seeing this type of thing. I mean, obviously I'm pulling from mainstream sources, but the way that it's packaged together, you just don't get that. This is all the type of stuff that doesn't make it out there, and people aren't talking about it, your average people, and that's why that's the kind of thing that I like to bring out. So, this here, when I wrote my book, my first book, The Money GPS, I wrote it, and the reason I wrote it, the reason I had that foundation for a book, was because I took so many notes along the way on my reading journey over the years, so many of the most boring texts. You wouldn't believe, literally I was falling asleep reading them. And eventually I had so much data. And I thought to myself, I wish there was a book that just started from the beginning. Why can't I find out the beginning part and then start reading all of these boring texts? It would have made me learn so much faster. But it didn't exist. So this is what I did. I wrote this. I tried to get my family and friends to understand the information here. Some read it. None really took it to heart. But anyway, that's the way it goes. I'm so fortunate to have many people around the world who have read these books and who have shared their just positivity with me, and I'm really grateful. So if you want to check them out, link is in the description. If you're more interested in the audiobook version, you can get that at themoneygps.com.